My name is Michelle Cohen. I am the current chair of the Woodbridge Sustainability Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to another Tuesday workshop. And tonight our topics are recycling and plastic. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to thank CUPOP, the Commission, for the use of owned property, the rest of the Sustainability Committee, the Woodbridge Town Library, Sheila Freeman and Betsy Yaga from Town Hall for helping coordinate and promoting this event. One of the goals of the Sustainability Committee over the past year has been to improve recycling and encourage actions to reduce waste, such as buying only what you might use, or making soup from leftovers in the refrigerator, composting food, avoiding single-use disposable paper and plastic products. We're lucky to have some local experts on these topics. This evening, we have invited Cheryl Baldwin and Patricia Taylor to speak about recycling and plastics. Cheryl Baldwin has spent her professional life addressing waste management and waste reduction. She is an environmental analyst in the Sustainable Materials Management Unit at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. She also serves as staff support for Recycle CT Foundation, a Hartford, Connecticut-based state chartered fund that helps to raise public awareness and participation in recycling. Citizens of Woodbridge should have some familiarity with their work. We all received some information about what's in, what's out with our pass bill. I think this is what we want here. So on the bottom it has what's in, what's out, what goes in your blue bin. And if you visit the town's homepage, you'll see that there's a photo with a caption, "Can I recycle this?" It has the image of a hand holding a smartphone and the image from Recycle CT with the search bar, which is called the Wizard. Recycle CT has created very useful flyers and stickers, entertaining videos, and user-friendly search window that instantly tells you if something is recyclable and how to treat it. Ms. Baldwin has been interviewed on local NPR programs over the past year, and probably more, and has been traveling around the state educating towns about new recycling guidelines. The Sustainability Committee thought that it would be helpful to have Ms. Baldwin speak, given the overwhelming media coverage on the topic, in order to clarify the state of recycling in Connecticut and help explain the what's and whys of what's in and what's out. Patricia Taylor is the director of the Plastics Project at Environmental and Human Health, Inc. EHHI is a nonprofit organization composed of physicians, public health professionals, and policy experts dedicated to protecting human health and from environmental harm through research, education, and promotion of sound policy. Their areas of research, policy, and education include, just to give a few examples, wood smoke, artificial turf, vehicle exhaust, cancer, obesity, flame retardants, healthy schools, and plastics. Ms. Taylor is here today to talk about plastic because it's a huge and problematic part of recycling and because there are some concerning issues surrounding this convenient and ubiquitous material. So without further ado,
thank you. So I love giving like a small little bio, and then the host just makes me sound amazing. So thank you for making me sound amazing. And I want to start by saying congratulations, the Tuesday after a holiday, and you've come out to talk about plastic and recycling. So thank you for coming. So as she said, I'm with the Connecticut DEEP, and I'm here to talk about recycling. And the first thing I'm going to do is share what is the definition. What really is recycling? We all think of it as that we have our item, we've rinsed it out, we've put it in our container, our cart or a bin, we bring it to the curb, maybe you bring it to your transfer station, and you've recycled. Well, sort of. It's part of it. So we have the collection process, right? You bring it to the curb, and you have a hauler pick it up. And then the material is actually brought to a materials recovery facility, also known as a MRF. And there the materials are sorted. You have different plastics and different paper, different fibers, and they're baled to specification, which means that they're put into a large square, if you would, and there's wires around it. And they have to meet a certain specification in order to sell it. The company that wants to buy all nice cardboard really doesn't want any aluminum cans in there. So they have to meet a specification so they can sell it. And then what happens is they sell it to somebody who makes a new bottle, and we in turn buy the bottle in another consumer product, in this case milk. And then what happens? We rinse it, we put it on the can, it goes around and around. And that is recyclable. A lot of people are concerned about the market. It's like the first time ever that residents are like really engaged in the industry of recycling. And that's what it is. It is an industry. And so I thought I'd share a little bit about the China sword. It, of course, was a policy that started coming out actually in 2015. You may not have been aware of it, but we were, where China was beginning to change some of their rules and specifications and telling us that the policies are changing. So just to give you a sense, if we start with at the bottom and move up, paper in 2017, 60% went to China. All types of paper. About 36% of plastics went to China, and none of the glass. Why? Because glass is heavy. Glass always goes local. So then in 2018, the China sword is in place. People are freaking out. The New York Times says it's the end of time. Well, 40% of our paper, and I don't mean Connecticut, I mean nationally, went to China. And in this case, it was only cardboard. They didn't want any of our mixed paper grades. There's like 51 different specifications just for paper, to give you a sense. They only wanted cardboard. Still had a little bit of plastic going to China. And then, of course, glass, local. And then now, I only had up until the first quarter in 2019. We still have paper going to China, and we still have plastic, and of course, glass is local. It's important to know that markets always change, and they're going to continue to always change. So, if you're going to get an update, Nine Dragons, also known as ND Paper, is actually a company from China. And do you know what they're doing? They can't get their paper. Why can't they get their paper? Because their state, their country, put together a policy called the National Sword. So what they're doing, they're coming to this country and they're opening up old mills. And they're buying our products, which is our recycled paper, or our paper as an end market or a feedstock. And then they're setting up a couple, one in Maine and one in Wisconsin. There's another company that's setting up a paper mill in New York. They're only going to be taking cardboard though. And then another facility is expanding to include perhaps mixed paper. Pratt, which you may be aware of, is a box company. They're also going to be constructing a new facility in Ohio, and maybe another one in Virginia. We have new glass markets coming in. We have a company called Urban Mining. I don't know if anybody's in construction. Urban Mining makes something called pozzolan. It's a form of cement. They are going to be using glass as part of that. And then we also have the first U.S. glass bottle factory, the first time a new glass bottle factory is being opened, and they're going to be starting up in the fourth quarter of 2020, and they're going to be taking recycled glass. And then for markets number 3 through 7, in terms of a lot of people think of the resin codes, because apparently you're so involved in the industry, you know your resin codes. It's good. It's a stronger market if you can separate it so you can meet different specifications as opposed to selling it as a mixed barrel.
Are those the same numbers as that triangle on the bottom of something that has a number?
It is. They're all resin codes so that you can identify the type of plastic it is if you were selling your end markets, if you were selling your commodities. I'll get back to that because it's not really meant for us. And this is just to tell you that things change. China steps back from banning all scrap by 2020. Why? Because they have companies that are looking for our feedstocks. It's a business. NERC, which is the Northeast Recycling Council. The Northeast Recycling Council is a group that's been around for a long time. All states in the Northeast are members, and they assist and guide us, and we work on projects so that we can do a lot of regional efforts around materials management. And they just did a survey about MRFs. And what they found is a ton of mixed recyclables is worth $46. It probably doesn't mean much to you. It used to be worth $70, but it's still worth something. So while you don't need to know the details, what is important for you to know is that materials continue to have value. At this point, some materials have less value, some materials have very low value, but combined, there's still value. It's also important to know that they're more valuable when they're cleaner. And I don't mean just that they've been washed in the dishwasher. Cleaner in that we don't have any contaminants. No loose bottle caps, no toothbrushes, no batteries, no whatever the item is that is not a bottle, can or a container, but it's plastic and you think it might be acceptable. Most likely it's not. So when we remove those, I'm going to save questions for the end.
Oh, okay.
When we remove those materials, our materials are going to be much more valuable. So that's what gets to, are we doing it wrong? So I want everybody to take a deep breath. No judgment-free zone. Sometimes people get, very panicked about it. And I want to let you know that, yes, sometimes we do make mistakes. And there's a reason for that. Did you know that there's 5,000 to 10,000 new products on our retail shelves every year? 5,000 to 10,000 new products on our retail shelves. Do you think they're telling me what's coming on the shelves, so I can tell you whether or not it's acceptable in your bin? Do you think they're having conversations with our MRF operators in Connecticut? No. So, I know Michelle mentioned there's a tool on the website where you can look up and see if it's acceptable. And I respond to those questions if you end up sending an email, because sometimes there's a material or a product I've never heard of, so it's not in the tool. And then I might even say, could you send me a photograph? I still have no idea what you're talking about. And this is because we have new products coming on. So you had mentioned the label of the 3 arrows with a number. Those are resin codes. It's resin identification codes to let you know the type of plastic polymer or the plastic resin it is. And that helps manufacturers and end markets understand what kind of resin it is. And you use that to meet the bale specifications. It is not intended to be an educational tool for us. It is not meant to help us understand if it's acceptable or not. It doesn't even tell us if it's recyclable. It just tells us the type of plastic it is. This is a much better tool to use, and more companies are beginning to use it. In fact, I was so excited, you find out tonight, I have a cat, and I was so excited to see, I was going to take a picture for you, but it didn't work. On this, it has 2 of these. The first one says it's a paper box. And so I can recycle the paper box. But of course, it's something else inside, right? And so it says, rinse and insert lid in your metal can. So it tells you what it is. It's a plastic bottle. And then it gives you instructions. Empty and replace cap. This is put out by How to Recycle. They have a lot of different things in order to help people understand what to do with it, or even where to bring it. Because sometimes if it was a plastic bag, it might say bring it back to your retail store, right, if it's plastic foam. And so these are much better labels to follow. Something that I also wanted to share was just something new and encouraging, because sometimes we're overwhelmed and wondering, is it all worthwhile, or what's happening? So I've been attending a number of online seminars or webinars about Walmart and the Association of Plastic recycling. Fascinating, right? Well, what they're doing is actually quite progressive. By 2025, Walmart says all their brands, so you know that they sell some products that might not be their brand, but then some products are Walmart products. Anything there that is their brand, they say by 2025 is going to be 100% recyclable or reusable or industrially compostable. That's a big deal. By 2025, 20% post-consumer recycled content will be in all of their private brand packaging, which means that if it's 20% recycled content, that means 20% of the feedstocks that went into making this would have mixed paper from our recycling programs. And then by 2022, the label 100% of food and consumable private brands will be the How to Recycle label, giving us better instruction. And the one I really like is this last one, and I think you like this too, Trish, is they are going to work with suppliers to eliminate non-recyclable packaging material that has PVC and PS. So if you know your resin codes, as I know you clearly do, PVC is polyvinyl, and that is number 3, and polystyrene, which is I think number 6. And PVC is referred to as thermoforms. And this is a thermoform, where you're like, how do I get out of there? Well, if you think that this is acceptable, it is not acceptable in the recycling program. And that is what Walmart is doing.
You
So-
can peel the paper off the
Yeah,
back.
you could put it back up.
Well, you could do the
Peel
paper,
Yeah,
but you can't do the plastic.
right.
And so what's really cool is they're defining recyclables that 60% of the consumers in the US have access to the program that collects this material. And if that's not the case, they're not going to use that packaging material. And then you have to have the infrastructure to accept it. And that currently for plastic packaging, these are the materials that most of our programs can accept materials. I think you've heard that we have one list in Connecticut, and this follows actually that list. We're not the only ones that are coming up with a universal list for our states, though we were the first. But it is exciting to think about that we are part of a national trend to make things easier and to make things cleaner and more marketable. So I am a regulator. So this is, of course, an officer of the law, and this is to remind you or tell you, did you know that recycling is mandated by law? Did you know it was mandated by law? No. You didn't know that? Well, it is. Recycling, it's the law. It's been mandatory since either 1975, 1989, or 2012. So with a show of hands, do you think a law was passed in 1975 mandating recycling? Do you think a law was passed in 1989 mandating recycling? Or do you think a law was passed in 2012 mandating recycling? All right, I think the woman in the blue shirt is the only one that got the answer right. It was 1989. However, it was sort of a trick question because we did have more materials added in 2012. So mostly everybody's right. Sorry, John, it was not 1975, but it sounds really good.
It should have.
So these are all the materials that are actually mandated by law. That's a lot of materials. However, we really mandate the materials that you generate. If you don't generate them, then you don't have to worry about it. And if you took this list and you looked at just the top items, those are all the materials that would go in your blue bin, your blue cart, or your single stream commingled mixed recyclables. It makes it pretty easy. Is it a glass container, a plastic container, corrugated box, cardboard box, newspaper, magazines, etc.? And that's pretty much the standard list. However, we have other materials that are recyclable. So this is when you try to understand what's the difference between what is acceptable and what is recyclable. Electronics are recyclable, but you don't put them in the bin. Paint is recyclable, but you don't put that in the bin. Maybe you bring that back to your transfer station or a local hardware store. Textiles are recyclable, but you don't put those in your bin. Maybe you bring them to a local thrift shop, your transfer station, etc. It's a lot of materials. Eyeglasses, maybe you bring it to the Lions Club, but you don't put it in your bin. So there's a difference between what is acceptable and what is recyclable. It's also important to remember that recycling is really not the greatest R. The greatest R is actually waste reduction, so reducing, and then reusing when possible. I think, Michelle, you mentioned it where you're trying to say that part of the Sustainable CT group is trying to help understand how to perhaps simplify and how to reduce waste in general. And that's really much more important than recycling, because it's much more comprehensive, it preserves and conserves resources. Recycling is important, but there are other things that we could do as well. And just to share with you how we came up with the process, maybe you've been part of a strategic planning for a local organization, or maybe even working on the town budget where you have to do a lot of planning. Well, my group also does a lot of planning, and part of it was creating the the comprehensive materials management strategy, or our strategic plan. And before we did that, we did some studies. We wanted to understand what is the characterization of our waste, of our MSW, our municipal solid waste. But we also wanted to understand what's the characterization of our mixed recycling stream. What does our single stream look like? How is it made up? And when we did that, we learned about contamination, and that we actually have a lot of contaminants going through. Now, the study was done in 2015, so it was a while ago. And anybody guess how contaminated our recyclables were in 2015?
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah, well. Okay, the woman in the blue shirt, you've got the answer.
50?
50? No, luckily not that bad. So 14 to 19% of the materials coming into our recycling was things that they did not want.
That does not sound bad at all.
It actually, from a national average, pretty good, but we got to do better than that, because we really want it down below 5%. Because you got to remember, every time we have contamination, it reduces the value of the materials, and then we can't sell it. And if we can't sell it, we're not recycling. So these are the top 5 contaminants that we found. Plastic bags are the big no-nos, and then shredded paper was a problem. And then, of course, bagged recyclables, or bagged trash, got put in there. Tanglers, such as wires and garden hoses, hangers, they all kind of get wound up in the gears. And then bottle caps when they're not on the bottle, or loose bottle caps. So we worked with all the materials recovery facilities, and we wanted to understand what was detrimental to them. How concerned were they about the contamination? And what we did is we went through a list of all the products and types of containers we could think of and said, how is this material detrimental to, first, your employees? When it comes in on the line, if you've ever seen movies, right? People are picking manually off of this moving conveyor belt. We wanted to understand when it comes in on the line, is it harmful to your staff? What about your equipment? Is it harmful to the equipment? And again, does it reduce the value of your commodities? Does it change the value of the materials they're trying to sell, which helps us recycle it? And that's when we came out with the what's in, what's out universal list. It's based on what they found to be detrimental to their system, their employees, for the reducing the value of their commodities. So some big changes were pizza boxes are in, but they want it clean, no food. Black plastic containers are in, no loose bottle caps, no shredded paper, no plastic bags, and no polystyrene, which you might call styrofoam. So those are the big overarching changes.
How clean should a pizza box be?
No food. So grease
But
is
if
fine.
yours looks-
Grease is fine. No liners. So no paper liner or cardboard liner. And then sometimes we just have to recognize some things are just trash. Maybe you can come up with some nice reuse opportunities, but sometimes it's just trash. So why does quality matter? We're back at the same place. We are at the front lines. We are so instrumental in terms of the whole process. When we put clean materials in our containers, it makes it easier for them to sort and process, which helps them meet the specification, which gives them access to an end market so the materials can be made into a new product which we can buy. So we are at the front end. We are very important to the process to try to reduce contamination. So I think I mentioned that sometimes products or materials coming in are detrimental to the system. Do you know what that is? Those are all plastic bags and plastic film wound around this gears, where normally materials would come in and up this and they would like sort and separate by weight, or perhaps there's a magnet, but you can't do that because it's all wound with plastic bags. Do you see the yellow? That's a man.
Yeah.
That's a man who has to jump into that machine, which this is all like sharp knives, and manually cut all those plastic bags from the gears. And they have to do this 3 times a day, every shift, 3 times a day. So it's also costly. It's a costly activity every time we put in things that they don't want. And this is all the material he cut off in his 15-minute break. So we can do better. So can you tell the difference between which is bagged recyclables and which is bagged trash?
These are identical photos.
They are identical photos, you got me. And so the point is, of course, is that you can't tell. And neither can the folks on the line. When the materials are coming through and they're coming in at a really rapid pace and it's a bagged material, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to throw it away. And so what the study found, when we looked at single stream or the mixed recyclables and we did a study and we looked at and assessed everything coming in, what they found is half the bagged material was trash. Other half was perfectly beautiful, clean, rinsed recyclables. But they still got put in the trash because they were bagged. So remember not to bag your recyclables. Oh, that's just another reminder. So this is glass at a MRF. Can you see the glass? It's very difficult to see the glass because there's a lot of other materials in there. The way that the system runs, and this is the same for all facilities, is that they have a grate. And it's a 2x2 inch grate system. And the way that MRFs are designed is that everything's going to get popped off or magneted, magnets and blown off. The containers and the fiber, it all goes off. And then the last thing is glass. And all the glass should follow through the grate. But you know what else falls through the grate? Toothbrushes, toothpaste, razors, batteries, pens, bottle caps, some hazardous materials. So you want to keep all those materials out because that's what our glass looks like. And what it means is it's still a commodity, but it's a very low value material. It's very hard to find a market for this material. So sometimes they have to clean it twice in order to be able to sell it. And so, again, we can do much better.
Sure, that's an inhaler at the top of the screen.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah.
A white plastic inhaler. Like an asthma inhaler. Huh?
I thought it was the top of the squeeze block.
Oh, maybe.
I know, you could spend days going,
I know.
what's that?
Here's one of them.
Another good reminder is not to put batteries in material, in the recyclables. Lithium batteries especially are a problem, and they're becoming more and more of a problem for folks on the line. Do you know why? Because they explode and they cause fires. And what we're getting from our facilities is that there's pretty much a fire almost every week because of lithium batteries. And so it's not just that people are throwing away batteries, but they're also throwing away toys or other things with batteries. So again, we just want cans and bottles and paper. Other things to keep out, if it wasn't, if you're not aware, no syringes, no propane tanks, no ammunition, no lawnmower blades, no knives, etc. And so this is the new webpage for Recycle CT. What's in, what's out. And you can see there's a search tool there, and this is where you would type in a question that you have. You would type in the product, and it should say, bring it to, it's acceptable in your recycling program, or maybe call your local recycling coordinator, because not every town has a transfer station, and so sometimes you have opportunities at the transfer station that you don't have elsewhere. We also have a lot of recycling resources, things that you can print out. And this is just a reminder that this really is a residential recycling program. However, there are businesses that this might be really beneficial for. If you are a large business like Big Y, Price Chopper, or Target, this program would not apply. You have different types of materials, you're a commercial entity, it really doesn't work. But if you're a small business, maybe you have an office or something where the materials that you're generating are very similar to a resident, then by all means encourage folks to use this list. And again, just to define the difference between acceptable and recyclable. A lot of things are recyclable, but not everything is acceptable in the curbside program or the mixed recycling. And again, cleaning of food. And that's it for me. Do I have time for a 5-minute quiz?
More than that.
I'm going to give you a quiz because I'm going to quiz you, that's why. I guess there's no reason. It's just because I find joy in it. All right, we'll start with an easy one. Is this in or out?
Out.
Who's in? So this is polystyrene.
Yeah,
That's hard.
hard
You're
traction.
giving me a hard time. This is polystyrene, this is out. All right, let's start with something. Pasta box.
In.
Correct.
Now, do you have to take the Class C?
Yeah.
You don't have to, unless you're like a really uber fanatical person. I personally rip it out,
I do
but
too.
I'm not, you don't have to rip it out.
I don't know if there's some, okay.
And then after we take it out, do we put it in the nylon recycling, the plastic from here?
Say it again?
I also take the plastic from the pasta. Do I put it in the nylon recycling?
No, I would put it in the trash.
In trash.
Yeah.
In.
And what if you didn't do it, or you have other options besides your recycling
Go
card?
get a nickel for it.
Go get a nickel for it. Do you know what happens if you don't get a nickel? That nickel goes to the general fund.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a big help.
I was going to say, so take it yourself or give it to the general fund.
Why do you think they do
Connecticut
that?
thanks you.
Because they make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah, where does it go?
You have to take a look at it.
This is in
Out.
Are you sure?
Yes. In. Out.
Actually, I would say this is in.
Yeah, really?
It's a container.
Does it have a number on it?
I
Did
usually
you look at numbers, or is it because it's
Are we
small?
supposed to look at numbers?
No.
I mean,
What
that
would
was
the
what we
numbers
were
tell you?
told originally, is that anything that had
So
a
remember-
triangle and a number.
Remember we
could
talked
put in.
about that the numbers are resin codes?
Right.
And that they're really just to identify the type of plastic it is for the industry. And that it's not meant to educate us in any way. Unless you really want to bail these up and you're trying to meet a bail specification.
One time it was.
So it's really not meant, If you were gonna look at the label, I would look at the how to recycle label. So in terms of this program, it's best to think of, is it a container?
Okay.
And most containers are yes. Some containers are not so great. Right.
Sometimes they'll cut off the top so you can fit more in. Is that, I should do that or not?
You should cut off.
Well, I cut, so that you can stack
Yes.
them easier and, you know, if they
Oh,
have
you
a
mean
lid-
this type of
Yeah.
plant?
Rip off the lid,
Yeah.
you mean?
No, I would leave it together.
All right, all right.
The smaller it is, the harder it is to capture.
Yeah, well, right, okay, I just like to get more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Out.
This is actually out,
This, okay.
because this is cardboard with a metal liner and sometimes a metal top and sometimes a plastic top. And they do not want these kind of containers. So this is out. So this is when a container fools us a little bit.
You mean that metal liner doesn't make it a can?
This is definitely out. Say it again?
Metal liner doesn't make it a can?
No, it
Doesn't
doesn't.
that would go with the films for the film stuff that you take back to the store? No? Okay.
There was an article in the paper, I don't know, a year or so about like Whole Foods and Lowe's and take all sorts of plastic bags now. They don't take just
That's
grocery
right.
bags. So we can take our stuff there, that's still.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
So the WRAP program accepts plastic film, which is more than bags. However, not all kinds of plastic are film. So you can see this is very crinkly. And it doesn't stretch, it tears. So this is not film. So an example of film is bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bubble wrap is the same as plastic bags, where it stretches, doesn't rip, and it's soft, and you can pop it for entertainment. So you might be confused about that. This is definitely, that type of plastic
Not
bag
film.
is out.
Okay. Yeah.
This is another type of plastic film that's in. These are referred to as air pillows.
That's in?
This is not in your recycling bin, but you can bring it to your retailer for plastic bags, along with plastic bags.
Whole Foods.
All right, any participating retailer, so it includes Price Chopper, Big Y, Target, Walmart, etc.
Yeah.
Milk carton?
And,
Correct, in.
but in the article, they didn't have Stop and Shop. I was surprised by that.
Uh-oh, take it out.
But there's beautiful, clean recyclables if you open it. So is it out?
Out.
You're
Now, is the
correct.
milk, is the milk,
Open it and milk is good.
That's right, if you debag it, it might be in.
but is the milk container, is that recyclable?
Excuse me?
The milk container?
Yes, it's recyclable.
They are?
Acceptable. The milk cartons are acceptable.
Oh, but what about the, they're,
Do you leave the caps on?
Leave the caps on.
oh, all right, because that's carving them out.
Box like a milk or chocolate milk with the plastic lid.
Yep,
Cap.
that is
Go.
acceptable. Yep, it's in.
So those
Can we
cardboard
smash
bags,
them?
the wax.
Can we flatten them?
You could, but I would keep them whole. Keep them whole.
Okay. They want them takes up a lot of space.
So this is another trick.
No.
Ice cream was an exception, wasn't it? Is that ice cream?
All ice cream containers are out.
Why is that?
It's a different kind of paper. See, this is when you don't, do you really want to know about the industry in terms of wet strength and whatnot paper? I know it glazes my eyes over, but just trust me that when you talk to the carton council, it has a different type of wet strength, it's a different grade of paper, and that when you do a mixed carton bale, they don't want this type of material in it.
Yes, and?
In,
Got the lid in, I can hear the rattle. What's that?
I'd say in.
this is actually out. This is what the new, a six-pack, how we used to have six-pack rings? This is the new six-pack ring.
And they're not in.
And this is out. I mean, it's not a container. It's sort of a loose lid, but not really, but this is out. It is recycled, meaning it has recycled content in it, but don't be fooled that it's acceptable.
Would it tangle in the shape, do you
How,
think?
how are you supposed to know that? If it didn't come to me.
It's very confusing. Remember when we talked about 5,000 to 10,000 new products? every year on our shelves.
Because it must have those arrows, right?
It's not about the arrows, it's about how to recycle label. If we can get more manufacturers to use that label, it will make it easier.
The item that you just had there, you should at least cut that, shouldn't you, because it's dangerous for animals.
That one's
not so
actually engineered that way because it's less dangerous for
Is it?
animals than the webby one,
Yeah.
where they could get their head caught in it.
And I don't think you need to cut it if you're putting it in your trash. I mean,
Not in Connecticut. Because it's not landfill.
it's not. Do you have a question in the back?
I was just going to say, would you say that it's food containers are a better way of thinking about what can be recycled in regards to plastic and paper containers that can be confusing? So the top of
Mostly.
that six-pack is not a container, it happens to be a plastic item, but it's not a container in the what's in
Yes.
category?
It's all about containers, but it's not just food, because we do have other types of containers too, but mostly.
But that is a container.
It is a container, which is what I keep saying, it's all about the containers.
Packaging.
And what would you do with this?
I would put it
It's in.
It is in, but I would take off this and then put this in there,
The top goes in the garbage then?
Yeah.
and the top goes in the garbage.
What
Because it has
number is
a
on the bottom?
Doesn't
Excuse me?
matter.
What resin number is on the bottom?
Does it matter?
Well, the old days, we were told 1 and 2.
It doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
We can't let go, okay?
Exactly, I know, you gotta let it go.
This is called
You gotta let it go. I know, it's hard. You know, it's like we also used to separate newspapers from magazines, and now we can commingle
It
them.
took my husband and I months before we would commingle our recycling. You know, we had, this is where our newspapers go, this is where the glass goes, this is where the plastic
I
goes.
still separate, and then I combine them when they're at the end.
Well, we go to the transfer station, but it was,
Yeah.
It is hard, it's a process, which is why I encouraged you all to take a deep breath before we did the dive in, because it is complicated. And sometimes questions come up about this product. You know, this is organic milk, and yet there's this plastic film on it. So this is sort of brings up an interesting thing where the readers in the MRF, so the MRF has these optical readers, and it can't read this because of the plastic film. However, the facilities are willing to take this because they want to make it easier for residents and consumers to accept all milk containers. But they prefer if we cut it. And I usually don't tell people to cut it unless you're really into it.
Well, sometimes it's actually written on the label that please cut off the film.
And so when we get, actually it does, it says please remove for easier recycling. However, what would be an easier way?
Don't put it in.
Maybe get the manufacturer to redesign their product. So it's something where if you are like a really big fan of Organic Valley and you just hate the way it's packaged, you as a consumer have power. For me, it's Teddy peanut butter. I still buy mine in glass, but slowly the glass jars are leaving the shelves. And when that last glass jar is gone, believe me, I will be writing Teddy because I want my peanut butter in glass. Just who I am, it's what I'm about. And so there is some ways in which you can make an impact by contacting and letting manufacturers of products know how you like your packaging and how you don't like your packaging.
Oh, boy. That would do a number on that machine.
That would do a number.
But you can throw
Yeah,
it in
Is
the
that
metal.
glass or plastic? I can't tell.
Oh, this is glass.
You can throw that in the metal container.
You could, so there's a lot of materials that you might be able to bring to your transfer station for scrap metal,
Yeah.
but we're talking mainly about it is definitely
Right,
out of your
right.
bin.
Oh, that's a good
Trash.
question.
This is out, and actually, this is plastic film. You know how somebody was asking about what can go with plastic, within plastic bags? And they have this great label on it. It says remove paper label before recycling and bring it to a store drop-off. So I think that's the future, is the how to recycle label. So I'm going to save all other questions until after Trish talks. I'm sorry for taking so much
Don't
time.
get
Oh, no, that was great.
I know, I'm sorry. I realized what time it was. So I've left you a message.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So any